Hello there. Welcome to another episode of SparkCom podcast. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great, Manny. Did you have a good holiday?
Absolutely. It was a wonderful time at the lake. Got a little sunburned, but ready to get back into action here. Wanted to dovetail off of some of the conversations we've been having the past couple of episodes regarding pivoting. I want to dig our heels in, so to speak, and really talk about why a company should pivot, if they should pivot, and if so, in what direction. And I want to do it in a manner which encompasses real world examples of companies that have successfully and unsuccessfully pivoted. So I want to start with that, Adam. So let's talk about the gold standard of pivots, which is to one degree, what happened with Netflix. Do you want to talk about that first?
Absolutely, sure. We'll start there. This being early August of 2020, we see a lot of people talking about pivoting now. It's become an overused term, to put it mildly. And what I try to remind people of, the term, I think, got popularized in the field in basketball. And so somebody gets down near the basketball hoop and then they would take a pivot. The point here is you can pivot out of bounds, or you could pivot and find yourself face-to-face with Shaquille O'Neal. That doesn't do you any good at all. Neither of those do you any good. So what we want to do is we want to learn how to do strategic pivots. We want to do things that are smart and good for our business. Pivoting alone is not inherently a good thing. Pivoting is good whenever you're trying to make your company more successful, sell more stuff, and make more money. So the first thing that you have to do when you're going to start thinking about a strategic pivot is know the unmet need you're trying to fill. Where are you trying to go that are going to make your customers very happy? And that's why we say that Netflix is the gold standard. Netflix said that their value proposition was to deliver entertainment, right? And so they went out there and they came up with a model of sending DVDs and VHS tapes out to the homes. And in the process of building their business model, they bankrupted Blockbuster, that was the king at the time, using stores. So what did they do? Well, they understood customers. They understood how their customers wanted to consume entertainment, and they became very, very good at delivering to customers what they wanted, what they needed. So after Blockbuster died, it was sort of like, well, what's our next act? And a lot of people said, well, you should start delivering merchandise because you have these giant distribution centers. You're the largest customer of the post office. You're the largest customer of UPS and FedEx. You really seem to understand logistics and transportation. It just seems natural to us that you would start to do general merchandise. And there was a lot of analysts that were calling for this to happen. Against all of that pressure from the analysts, the leadership team at Netflix said, wait a minute, no. That would be trying to pivot into something based on some capabilities we have. But you know what? They're different markets. The market for entertainment is different than the market for general merchandise. So before we take and start throwing assets or throwing capabilities against the problem, let's sit down and say, what do we really know? We know entertainment. And they said, well, what's going to happen in the future of entertainment? And it was like, well, wait, look, all this bandwidth that's coming at us. Bandwidth's been doubling in its ability to perform over 14 to 16 months. It's not going to be long before people will be able to easily stream their entertainment down onto their devices. So they said, what we have to do is we have to realize that the future is not going to involve these DVDs. The future of entertainment is going to be streaming. And then they pivoted with their customer. So that pivot meant that they used their value proposition, that we deliver entertainment, to figure out where the customer is going, see their needs. And what they actually did was then destroyed the capability. They actually unwound those distribution centers. They got rid of those logistics people, and they replaced them with tech people that could help them understand how to get into streaming, how to deliver against streaming. So that was a strategic pivot where they understood their customers, they went to where the need was going to be, and then they brought innovation to the problem. So by understanding the customer and mating it up with innovation, they were able to pivot their company. And that's why it's the gold standard. Good pivots are not based upon extending your capabilities. That's defend and extend management. It's saying, hey, we've done this, we could do a little more of it by going to this market or somewhere. Yep. That generally will almost always get you in trouble because it stretches your resources. You're trying to stretch your capabilities. And the worst thing is you don't know the customers. You don't know if you're meeting an unmet need. All you know is you're going out there doing something new. It looks like on the margin it's cheap and easy. Oh, hey, yeah, we could just go out there and deliver some, books, or we could go deliver some food or whatever, because we already know how to deliver. And it looks cheap and easy, but it's really a horrible idea because you don't know the customer and you don't know the customer need. So we always have to go back to that. If you're going to be successful, know your value proposition, know what you're offering people. And in the case of Netflix, that's exactly what they did. They went out, they kept with their customers, they delivered entertainment. Now they've done it again, because what they said was, if we're going to help people have a great entertainment experience, what we see into the future is broadcast television, traditional movies, they're limited. Why are people going to go to a movie theater if they don't have to? A lot more of this is going to be consumed in alternative venues than a movie theater. The broadcast television guys are getting creamed because there's so many, like there's 50, 100, 150, 200, 250 cable channels. So the broadcast guys are getting creamed. So you know what? What people really need is content. They need really good content. Advertiser-supported content is going to struggle. We see that. So what did they do? They pivoted again to the needs of their customers. And they said, we're going to go from being a tech company that's really, really good at streaming. That's getting generic. So those resources are going to be passed on. We'll send those resources to Verizon or Sprint or somewhere else where they can be successful. And we're going to build a new capability around content creation. I mean, studios, and film types, and actors, and all of that sort of thing. So in 1 decade, we've watched a company go from pivoting towards from a capability around logistics to a capability around technology and streaming, and then to a capability around movie production, entertainment production, directorship, hiring of actors, all of that sort of thing.
Yep. And I think a lot of the foundation for people or companies that pivot into these areas that extend their capabilities rather than extend their value comes from a fear, from being fearful of going out into a new domain as long as they keep following their value statement, right? And so now we consider the other side of the fence, the very relevant conversation that you and I had this morning regarding a company that is over 100 years old. I read earlier it was founded in 1888 and has been had a meteoric rise, had lots of quote unquote innovation, and owned and dominated the market for decades and decades and decades. And then it missed a significant opportunity in the 90s, really. And from there till now has been struggling. And that, of course, is the Eastman Kodak company. So do you mind talking about the conversation we had this morning and how that, from the powerhouse giant that it was to the missed opportunity of digital cameras to now going into pharmaceuticals? What's that all about?
Well, again, a lot of people are recognizing that Kodak doesn't have any capability in pharmaceuticals. And that's true. But that's just the very beginning of understanding why this is absolutely going to fail. It has no hope of success. And we start by saying, well, wait a minute, what did Kodak do right when it was successful for 75, 80 years? They understood customers. So at one point, getting a photograph taken was only done by a professional. You maybe got your picture taken once in your entire lifetime, right? Well, they created what we call amateur photography by coming out with new cameras, new films, new ways of developing. So they were able to migrate or create this market, just like Apple's done with the iPhone. They created this mobile computing market, right? With the iPad, the iPhone, they've really changed the way we think about how we're going to get our work done. That's what happened with Kodak. They changed the way we thought about capturing images, using images, not just relying on the written word. We would now have these pictures that we could take. They get up into the 80s, and what happened was the government needed to transmit images from satellites to Earth. So that was inherently needed to become digital. And they said, could you help us with that? And Kodak said, well, maybe. And they said, well, how about if we give you a lot of money? Would you help with that? They said, oh, yeah, if you'll fund the research, we'll go after it. And they did. And they invented digital photography. Now, you'd sit there and say, okay, what should you do? Well, you should look into the future and say, what's the use of digital photography? How could this develop? What could happen? And instead, what they did was they fell back and they said, what do we do? Well, we make cameras, these little amateur cameras, and we make film, okay? And that's our capability. And they forgot their value proposition. Value proposition was helping people use pictures, use images, get the most of it out of they could, the whole amateur photography business, which could now become potentially, help people at an amateur level do professional things for their business, do their own logos, do their own photography, do their own ads, that kind of a thing. That would be where the future would lie if you were thinking about your value proposition. But instead, they've gotten stuck in their value delivery system. The value delivery system was film and cameras, film cameras, film cameras, and so they never did it. They just took all that technology and licensed it away to Minolta, companies we've forgotten about, but they drove the future of the digital. So then they're trying to save themselves in the 80s. They're kind of messed up. They got to figure out the next thing to do. And they bought Sterling Drug. Okay. Again, what's the big mistake? They bought Sterling Drug because they said, hey, when you're in the film business, you do a lot with chemistry, right? And so drug companies do a lot with chemistry. So we've got chemistry capability. They've got chemistry capability. Let's put those forces together. 5 years later, they sold Sterling Drug for $1.4 billion. So they lost $4 billion in the matter of about 6 years, because what did they do? They tried to pivot into a new business based on their capabilities, not based upon understanding anything about the customers, right? They didn't know what people needed in pharmaceuticals. They didn't know what the customers were, and they didn't have any ideas for how they would innovate in that industry. So they got into it. They said, oh, we're going to put our capabilities. Well, the comparison between what a Kodak did in chemistry and what a Sterling Drug did in chemistry is kind of like comparing a chef and their use of chemistry with the pesticide company and kills your bugs. Yeah, they both use chemistry, but they're solving completely different problems. They have different processes. The capabilities are wildly different. So here Kodak loses $4 billion trying to build their next thing on capabilities rather than understanding customers. And then last week, the U.S. federal government through the Defense Act says, oh, you know what? We think that we should have more domestic manufacturing of ingredients for pharmaceuticals. That could be a good point. I'm not an expert in that area. I haven't studied it. So it's a policy decision. Okay, it's a policy decision. But what they did was they said, we're going to have a local domestic manufacturer of these ingredients, the generic base compounds, right? Not the high dollar, make a lot of money stuff. It's the compounds that have been offshored to the low cost manufacturer. And that's been China and India. We're going to give $765 million to Kodak to build a plant to get into that business. Once again, what does Kodak know about the needs of the pharmaceutical industry? Absolutely nothing. What do they know about the supply chain of the pharmaceutical companies? Absolutely nothing. When asked how long it was going to take them to build the plant to actually make these ingredients, the chairman CEO said 4 years. So they can't even get into production in a short period of time. So they don't have any of the capabilities, nor do they have any understanding of the market. And that's why it's absolutely going to fail, right? It has no hope because it's not built based upon understanding an unmet need. The need for these what are called APIs, or these pharmaceutical ingredients, okay, are well known. The manufacturing is well known. The domestic manufacturers quit making the product because it was cheaper to have it made offshore. You want to have a policy discussion about this? Get the people that invented the processes in the room, get them talking about it and say, do we need this capability in the United States? If we do, how do we make that happen, right? But it's not strategic. It's not pivoting into a new market. It's a tactical, ingredient level, supply chain kind of a discussion that they need to be having.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I'm reminded of what Bob Iger did a number of years ago, and was acquiring companies that from a distance, people would say, why is Disney acquiring Marvel, or why are they acquiring 20th Century Fox, or the Pixar thing made sense. But those other ones, and I mean, Lucasfilm kind of made sense, but 21st Century Fox, that was a $70+ billion deal. Why would they pay for that? Well, if you start to peel back the layers of the reasons why, it was because they saw that streaming was becoming a thing. And what they needed above all else is content. Mm-hmm. And 21st Century Fox had scores and gobs of content. So this is the kind of vision that has kept Disney ahead and at the top. Is now, of course, Disney Plus is starting to bump up against Netflix as an entertainment provider through streaming. and they're not stopping. And so it's clever and interesting that, why would somebody in the government's, eternal wisdom give almost, $750 million for basically a dying company to try to make 500 jobs in Rochester, New York? I mean, really?
Yeah, the odds that the plant will ever get built are extremely low. If that single digit phenomenon happens, that they create a plant, the odds that they'll staff it and never make a product are lower still. So it's really not going to happen. And perhaps there's things here like poking the pharmaceutical companies in the eye with a stick, saying, we've been trying to get you to go to domestic manufacturing, you wouldn't do it. So we're going to give these money to Kodak just to see if we can't get your attention and irritate you enough to do something. Politicians play games in very interesting ways that are very much unlike business people, right? But what we want to say is, the value of Kodak stock has gone up something like 50-fold in 1 week based upon this loan. And what I would say is, don't do it. Don't even trick yourself into it. You don't want to go down that road. This is not going to pan out. Whether or not they get more money doesn't matter. They're not going to get there, because at the end of the day, they would have to make a product, and then somebody in the pharmaceutical industry would have to buy it at higher cost in a world in which everyone in government is already yelling at pharmaceutical companies about the cost of their product. They're saying it's too high. We want pharmaceutical companies to lower their prices. So if they said, well, great, now we're going to go buy ingredients from Kodak, so we want to ratchet up the price another 5%, that's never going to happen, right? I mean, they're not going to no government is going to force them to buy a product at a higher price. It's just doomed. It's completely doomed. So we go back and say, could they have figured out something to do? And I would say, yeah, but they've been blowing it for a long time. I would talk about Sterling. It was just a few years ago that they came out with this claim that they were going to introduce a cryptocurrency. And once again, it's like, what? Why? And they said, well, photographers are going to need this cryptocurrency, and they're going to need a blockchain technology base in order to track their photos and their copyrights. Well, it turns out that the professional photographers already have a way to copyright the material. They already have Getty images, and they have distribution arms that can track those materials. Reuters is out there looking at images on the internet, finding out if copyrighted material has been used. There wasn't really an unmet need. Nobody needed the blockchain technology. And when it came to cryptocurrency, it's like nobody really needs another cryptocurrency. It's unclear that we need any cryptocurrency, but for sure didn't need one. It need one by Kodak. So Kodak coin gets launched and fails. Why? Once again, we don't know our customers. We have no target market. We don't know where we're headed with this. So let's go back again and look at things that work. Back for many, many years, IBM made computers, right? That's how international business machines. That's IBM. And so we said, okay, what do we need to do? We keep making bigger, better computers, bigger, better computers, bigger, better computers. Well, it turns out that we did that for a long time, and then the PC comes along. We don't really see the PC. We kind of missed that, and the market starts shifting over to the PCs. So you sit there and say, well, what do our customers need? And what they started to realize was there were still big corporations out there that were looking at how to manage enterprise applications, giant payroll packages, big accounting packages, things like that. So the enterprise software needs were still prevalent. And the second thing was that some companies were trying to migrate towards these things, but they weren't big enough yet. And so this is where they sold their mid-range computers. And that's where they started to see what we now call SaaS, or software as a service. So they said, this is where our customers are headed. And the CEO takes over and he says, we're going to direct our resources away from making hardware and towards offering enterprise solutions and software as a service for our customers. And they turned IBM into a software company. And it works. Why does it work? Because what people needed weren't more mainframes and more mini computers. Their computing problems were being solved by this plethora of companies doing small computers. What they needed was software that would be capable of handling the enterprise level software.
Yeah.
And that's where IBM stepped in and they made it successful. So that's a story that I like to keep reminding people. If you're in business and you're struggling, your struggle probably isn't because you need to extend your capabilities. It's probably that you don't understand your value proposition. You don't know the need that you're trying to meet. One of the best stories of this was Singer. And when I say Singer, people of my generation, maybe your generation, Manny, they think of sewing machines. If we get people in their 20s, I'm not sure that the name means anything to them because Singer's been gone for so long. But the Singer story is that in the 1970s, they'd invented the sewing machine. They had all these innovations in sewing. It goes on for 100 years. The same story as a Kodak. but they quit innovating. They really became more of an industrial company. They're making these heavy-duty sewing machines that went into the home and heavy-duty sewing machines that went into the textile plants. Well, the textiles were all starting to go to Asia. And as the textile plants were going to Asia and clothing was being made in Asia, this company out of Japan made the Brother sewing machine. And they started to do a lot more innovation. And so Singer kind of sat back on its laurels, had its brand name, made some money, everything's going fine. So they wake up one day and realize that this company, Brother, is stealing a lot of their market. Brother's getting all the offshore industrial plants. Brother's getting the offshore homemaker. Simultaneously, the idea of home economics, where we used to literally make all the girls in high school go take a sewing class, it was required in the high schools in the 60s and in the early 70s. Suddenly, the leadership said, wait a minute. I don't know that people are going to be making their dresses at home very much longer. All these dresses are getting made now in Asia. You can buy a made dress for cheaper than buying the material and making one at home. This doesn't look like a very good business. Really, what is it we offer customers as Singer anymore? Where are our customers headed? How would we add value? And they couldn't come up with anything. They really couldn't. They sat there and said, I can't figure out. Our customers, these people that we've been talking to for years, these homemakers, that's changing so dramatically because they're becoming work moms, right? And their needs are changing dramatically. We've lost touch. So what they do? They called up an investment banker. They said, call up Brother. And they said, make a deal. And they sold everything to Brother in 30 days. Sold the brand name, sold the manufacturing plants, sold the technology rights, and sold everything you've ever thought about when it comes to Singer sewing machines. They sold to Brother in 30 days. Turned the whole company into cash. Literally, the whole company's cash. Nothing left. Now it's okay, we can either distribute this to our shareholders or what? And they said, where is there a growing unmet need? And the leadership spent a year. And they looked around and they said, wait a minute. One of the things we see happening is we see with Ronald Reagan, the growth of the defense industry. And the biggest part of the growth in defense is in electronics. And that's where the fewest suppliers are. Hughes is doing well. Hughes is doing very well. Boeing's getting a piece of that business. Donald Douglas is getting a piece of that business. But it's really focusing on electronics for defense is not a well-met area right now today. They took their money and they started going off doing electronics, and that's what they did. They made acquisitions. They bought forward-looking infrared technology. They bought heads-up display technology. They started to buy the technology that defense contractors would use in airplanes, fighters, bombers, tanks, this kind of electronic technology that would be very valuable for them. And they rebuilt Singer as a defense electronics company. That was within 8 years, it was acquired by General Dynamics for 20 times what the value of Singer was when it was a sewing machine company. So this is the most dramatic story that I've ever heard of, because the company said, we've lost our customer. Instead of wasting money trying to go in some kind of a war with Brother where they were going to lose, they said, those guys have the innovation. Let's sell them, get the money, then let's go find some unmet needs. And that's what I try to tell entrepreneurs and small business owners. Are you doing this because you like doing it, or are you doing it because your customers need it? If you're doing it because you like doing it, maybe you just have a hobby, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a business. A business is meeting customer needs. What is that unmet customer need? And if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to understand what that need is, and then you have to deliver against it. That's the pivot. Pivot to the need. Pivot to what people want as you go forward, and then apply innovation. If you're an early pivot and you apply innovation, you have the chance to make tremendous amounts of money.
Yeah, and you see a lot of people struggle with that idea. You see a lot of companies fight tooth and nail to defend and extend their existing ideology and business model. And you're seeing it right now with the collapse of retail.
Yeah,
you're seeing it with companies that just a few years ago were powerhouses. Sears is basically gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that was the store, and you never think that it would go away. To those that are part of our email list, we're going to send out a list of some of the most interesting top-level pivots, including the Singer. I mean, that's a very illustrative model of really looking at the value statement right in your face and making that decision, and really taking fear right out of it. Because if you're fearful, you wouldn't have made that big acquisition of the electronics for military complex and so forth.
Yeah, another really good example of this is Facebook. They had built their platform. It was growing very, very fast. And the leadership sat down one day and said, look at what's going on over here with pictures. You got people pinning things up with Pinterest. You have Instagram that's out there getting these pictures. And they started to realize that, again, like Kodak had taught us, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So instead of going on Facebook and typing a message or asking, I could go in, I could just take a picture of my lunch, post the picture, right? Then everybody know where I'm eating lunch, what I'm eating for lunch. It's up, it's gone, fine. That's all I wanted. It was instant. I didn't want it to be around forever. I'm not trying to create an archive for a museum somewhere, right? I'm just trying to say what I'm doing for lunch. I'm trying to say what I'm doing at the mall or what I'm doing over at the amusement park, that sort of a thing. And so they go out and Facebook buys Instagram, and they paid, I'm trying to get the number right in my head now, but it was over $1 billion for a company that literally had no revenues. They had no revenues. They paid $1 billion for it. Again, that's the sort of strategic pivot. You're saying, we don't have any capability, but that's where our customers' needs are. So if they're going towards pictures, we better deliver against that need or we're going to become obsolete. So they make this huge investment of $1 billion. You say, well, wait a minute, you're a tech company. Why didn't you just go invent the technology? And they said to themselves, well, if we start working on the technology today, Instagram's got a 3-year lead on us. So in 18 months, where will we be? In 18 months, where will Instagram be? We'll be forever chasing those folks. So we're going to forever chase them. That's a bad idea. Let's buy it. Let's build on it. Now, just 6 short years later, we have the United States Congress calling in the chairman CEO of Facebook for anti-competitive behavior because Instagram is so wildly successful. Was it anti-competitive? I don't think it was anti-competitive. What he did was he saw the future, realized the trends were headed in that direction, made a big bet, made the investments. He created that market. He no more dominates or owns or anti-competitively behaves in that Instagram world than Eastman Kodak did when it invented instant photography, right?
Exactly.
Anybody else can go try to get into that business. You have Snap out there in that business, right? Anybody, you want to go get in that business, get in that business, but you better have a good idea. You better have some innovation that Instagram doesn't have, or you're just going to forever chase them and never make any money, kind of like Twitter does.
Yep, there's some talk on the street as well about Facebook beginning or entering into the TV world, and from not just the the electrons, so to speak, but the actual hardware. So I don't know if you've heard of that out there. There's talk about Facebook TV. You've got these TVs in everybody's living rooms, and people are not watching broadcast TV anymore. They're turning off the ABCs of the world, and everything's being streamed anyway. Why not have a platform, a portal, if you will, that has central to a piece of hardware?
Right.
We'll see what happens with that.
So with bandwidth, we created streaming for movies. What else did we do? Well, we call it the great democratization of the media. And so we killed newspapers. Newspaper companies had all these journalists, they're writing the news, we're getting the news out there. But they failed to see that their customers were very likely to want to consume their news through a new device, initially the PC, eventually a mobile device. So they kept focusing on the business cycle, the business model of a newspaper, until they just can't support it. It's a non-supported environment today. So now we see that, okay, so Facebook et al. Have killed off the newspaper business. Got a lot of people upset. How do we distinguish between fake news and not fake news? Finally, the regulators are sort of like, maybe we should look at this because, now we regulated the introduction of television. And radio we regulated, television we regulated. We didn't regulate this one. And now look what's happened. We don't know what's going on. But simultaneously over here on the side, you have Google with YouTube. And they've democratized entertainment, right? Now all of a sudden I can sit in my house and I can create my own 15-minute show, 5-minute show, 7-minute show, however long I want. And I can go out, and if I'm good and I connect with people's needs and they like my entertainment, I can get 1 million viewers, right? And so Google has demonstrated that there's this democratization of content, of entertainment content. So if you're Facebook, you sit there and say, wow, we've got all these users, we've got all these cameras, we've got all these people. Can we help with the democratization of this? Could we stream it somehow in a clever way, not just to our platform? Could we stream it to the television so that when you turn on your TV and it's in the background mode, I'm not watching ABC, NBC, CBS, if you're in the United States, or some other cable channel, but rather I could stream Facebook TV. And I could have channels in sports, and then this could be bringing in, everything from a pro football league to a little league team, right? And you could have something around cities where people talk about, what's going on in Las Vegas or New York or Tucson. You
Yep.
could talk about food, right? And people talk about the meals that they've had, and you could democratize that and stream that onto the television. So what that is it's looking out into the future and saying, okay, it's not going to be like today. What's it going to look like? Am I going to wait for it to happen, or do I shape it? Do I influence? Do I become part of that future? And when we see these unicorn companies, the ones that so many entrepreneurs would like to be, what we recognize is they're very good at spotting that need, right? And so they're the ones who jump out there and they get a lot of users on their platforms very quickly. Why? Because they meet an unmet need. It's what's scaring people about TikTok. TikTok comes along and they're proving that the attention span of all of us is getting shorter every single year. So now we've got a generation of people for whom 6 seconds is way too long, but they love TikTok. And so here's a new platform we think coming on. Microsoft's looking to buy it. Will it happen? Well, now we've got the White House saying they're going to shut TikTok down entirely because the way the data is collected on servers, it's in China. Apparently, they don't care that Google's got every Google search you ever did in your life. Google's got the link to every single YouTube video you ever watched. That's apparently okay because those are all stored on servers that are located somewhere in Idaho and Oregon near great big rivers where they can get cooling for them. But if the servers are somehow connected in China, well, we're going to shut it down.
Yeah.
Okay, but is it going to happen, not happen? I would imagine the platform's successful enough that somebody will try to figure out a way to make that happen. Microsoft's not a bad idea. Microsoft was a dead company. They were down there PC until finally they get rid of Ballmer, who was probably the worst CEO in history in modern era. And the new fellow walks in and says, it's not about PCs. That's the past. That's our capability. Now what's the future? It's going to be around cloud computing, software as a service, shifts the whole company around. Yeah. And Microsoft makes this enormous comeback because they strategically pivot their resources towards cloud computing and software as a service. Can they continue down that road by getting another platform? They bought Skype, didn't do much with it, right? They haven't done much with these sort of platforms now. It's time for them to think about how to do that and how they could add value in that field.
Well, TikTok might be that opportunity for them.
Yeah. So the key here, though, for our entrepreneurs is to recognize the people who do these platforms that make these unicorns, make $100 million. What they see is an unmet need. Okay, medical records, are they being managed well? Police records, are they managed well? Just look around, where's the data? Yeah. You and I talked about a company where the guys made dog food bags and they figured out, hey, if we had a database of the ingredients and all the dog food, then the people who buy dog food would like to use the database. The database with the dog information about the dog food is worth as much or more than all the dog food is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is some of the stuff we're going to be showcasing in our course. And it's about thinking like an innovator, which is, we all have the capacity to think this way, but we don't always have the experience and the courage to do anything with it. And so part of what we're doing here with our community is preparing people to think like innovators and then taking those steps required to make it into reality. Yeah. So this has been a great show, Adam, and appreciate your time. Next episode, next time, or maybe the one after that, I'd like to do a little bit deeper dive on what's happening in the entertainment and sports arena post-COVID. And there's going to be some interesting challenges there. We're also going to feature a couple of innovative entrepreneur CEOs that can give us an example of some thoughts from their mind on some of the decisions they made that were innovative, that took them to the next level. So any final thoughts, Adam?
I look forward to it, Manny.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you to all our viewers. We'll talk to you next time.